Oh, zing dang, ring dang, ja. So welcome to the news. Welcome to the news. So what we're trying to start to talk about today is that ultimately this whole podcast revolves around pre-selling. We're doing a lot of pre-sales in this podcast, so the purpose of why we're getting at that today is because if we were in front of a live audience, for example, if we were doing a concert somewhere, for example, we'd be basically doing a comedy show. Yeah, it's like a music comedy show, in essence. A music comedy show. So for today's comedy episode, for example, we're just going to try to talk about like philanthropy, energy, aerobics. So today's episode, if we were live, for example, at a concert, for example, we'd be doing a comedy show that corresponds to the essence of developing live comedy acts revolving around developing a lead-by-example process for developing philanthropy energy. Yeah, stay till the end to find out how it's going to go down. Just kidding. We're just going to touch on each piece by piece, as we think about it. The ultimate bottom line focus, primary hope and goal of doing live concerts ultimately to begin with is ultimately similar. Well, the beginning of this podcast talks about doing pre-sales. So pre-sales are very quite irrelevant in terms of developing consistent relevance, in terms of adding value to relevance in an ongoing basis by doing pre-sales in terms of thinking ahead a little bit in terms of trying to just project what's possible, what's conceivable for tomorrow, for example. And so today we're trying to think about, like, if we were doing a live concert, if we were in front of live people, if we actually brought this live, ultimately. The purpose of doing it live is to be able to then try to follow by example to do philanthropy energy, like bringing it to live spaces and towns, for example, so that we do comedy live. And it's like doing philanthropy energy aerobics, for example, because today we're, not live, but if we were live, we'd be doing aerobics, basically, that corresponds to developing philanthropy energy in that given specific town that we were in that specific day. So in essence, we want to have like all kinds of weird antics. So that's why it's a comedy show in essence at the forefront. Because like if we're doing like aerobics that corresponds to philanthropy energy, for example, then we're just trying to like lead by example by doing kind of like poetry that's live and adding like music at the same time and developing like lead by example philanthropy by doing research first within a given town. So for example, if we're on stage, that in essence we have that ability to connect with the local town, with the local organization, similar to developing a film. If you're developing a film, you have to get sort of permits in local places. You have to do certain things with local organizations, and you have to affiliate in differing ways to try to be able to develop a film in a live space, which is a business. And this, in essence, corresponds to trajectories and longer-term trajectory, lasting energies that, in essence, we're hoping to develop off the back end of live performances. But the live performances are fundamentally consisting of comedy. So in essence, we'd be talking about philanthropy energy aerobics. So how does that look? It looks similar to what we're doing right now, which is developing sound in the background. And at the same time, that sound corresponds to the aerobics, which we're sort of doing. We're setting the tone for the aerobics for philanthropy energy, which ultimately is comedic at the same time on the top layer and the top level, because beyond the nature of the sound and the comedy element of doing aerobics to try to prepare to basically go do philanthropy energy, which is corresponding to, in essence, a live show, which in essence is comedic because we're talking about aerobics and doing weird music stuff, which is trying to be entertaining with music on the top end and the back end and the back layer as well. But at the same time, in the middle ground, we have comedy, which corresponds to the essence of developing live aerobics, which is just making funny, weird maneuvers and doing funny, interesting, like steps and stretches to ultimately, actually, in real time and in real life, try to stretch to go then leave the stadium, leave the venue, leave the process, leave to the next venue, leave to the next element, which is a corresponding element of that process and that performance, which goes outside of the gates and the walls of that venue, ultimately, because it's perpetual energy. It's philanthropy energy. Philanthropy energy has to be sort of led by example. You have to set a prompt, and that's the sort of hope of how we want to try to set the stage of our comedy performances, is by having comedy and music on the front end. So we have music collaborations that are similar to old school films, for example, where the music is live, for example, during the films, in essence. But in essence, our live comedy is like live sketch comedy, but at the same time, it's leading by example into the essence and the realm of moving towards the essence of developing sometimes local and sometimes greater purposes that relate to other philanthropy energy connections outside of the venue walls, if possible. So we're trying to give birth to certain philanthropy energy, if you will, by giving prompts and giving incentives and giving sort of like spaces to like give food for thought that then are able to translate fundamentally translate into a different venue, which goes outside of the venue that we're in, by starting with comedy, and then in this instance, we're talking about aerobics. So everybody's stretching, we're getting ready, we're getting hyped up, we're also listening to music, we're getting tuned into some music. We have different music collaborators on stage, for example, but at the same time, we might have magicians, we might have random acts, random peculiar acts that come out of the cracks of the essence of the stage that are just like developing different peculiar tricks and side missions within each given live performance, which in essence is trying to speak to the essence of a game, after all, because it's like a game fundamentally at the core, but the comedy is the element that kind of keeps it sticky like glue at the forefront, in the beginning, in the center, in the middle. Because the comedy is sort of like ha-ha laughter that keeps everybody's attention just to try to stay centered on something that's funny, because funny makes it fun, and fun ultimately leads to action taking in a more passive and soothing and fundamentally unique and experiential fashion that corresponds to and speaks to a more useful encounter that in essence is beneficial to in the short term and the long term to the local community, the local performance audience, and therefore the local people that reverberate from the nature of the birth of that beginning source energy space and place that ultimately resonates from a concert that connects with a comedy performance, if you will. But it's more like comedy with a bit of depth to it, because it's like comedy poetry that has the ability to speak to the essence of philanthropy energy and taking philanthropy actions. And that's why we're starting things off a little bit with philanthropy energy aerobic exercise, because we're doing aerobics. This is like a stretch. This is a mental stretch in essence, because in essence, from the concert hall, from the space, from the venue, from whatever space that we're at, we're trying to develop inspiration seeds, birth inspiration mindsets to be able to travel to an outside space, to be able to connect with local communities and develop such philanthropy energy as like clearing animal shelters, for example, and developing this like causing an audacity for everybody to feel the audacity to go out and take actions, if you will, straight away based on the interest to just fundamentally be inspired to develop the idea that you have a fundamental ability to make change straight away as soon as walking out from a venue, or while participating in a venue, or while calling on the phone to other parts of the world during the venue, and having connections and connectivity aspects of, like, for instance, like philanthropy flashmobs around the world happening concurrently when nobody announced it, but it just sort of happens and unfolds in multiple venues at the same time. And so that the comedy and the poetry and the music collaboration and the music collaborative element of harmonious sound that comes from various frequencies coming to a similar aligned, synergistic place all come together in the form of developing philanthropy energy, in the form of something that is similar to like a marketing campaign to an extent, but it's like an in real life marketing campaign, if you will. And it starts and it stems from the stage of a comedy mindset, and a comedy mindset that combines with spiritual finance, and spiritual finance that combines with the essence of developing a story and a storyline that develops similar to improvisation that happens with comedians on occasion on stage, where they'll develop a line and a concept to be able to draw from and string from and develop more essences of a storyline and a fun fabric of a fundamental nature that's developed from a platform. And that platform that we're trying to make the stage for, or set the stage for, if you will, corresponds to philanthropy energy. And philanthropy energy speaks to doing more philanthropy and developing more philanthropy on the back end, and developing vibes and developing connection with people in local communities and doing good deeds, fundamentally doing good deeds. But this is all to be inspired from unique stage acts coming out of the cracks of the woodworks of differing various stage acts that are trying to speak to the essence of fundamental focuses that can cause change, because it causes change first within the humans that conceivably are drawing awareness to any given performances, so that then they therefore are inspired to understand the drastic amount of change that they're capable of making that very second. They can look down at their phone and maybe be inspired to send a text message or a mass text message or something beyond that, to connect with a local community, a local pipeline, a local awareness action being taken, change being made during the concert, for example. But at the same time, this is inspired by comedy. It's inspired by weird things on stage, like weird, voodoo, like diagrams being drawn live, and then there's a hologram that can blast off with a side from that voodoo ceremony in essence, and then we're at the same time being able to control multiple facets of varying energies that circulate around the earth at the same time, because fundamentally we have the interest and the ability to develop trajectories at all given times by using connection and leveraging connection from one person to the next to develop a potential to cause change, and an element that has an interest to cause change, and an element and an interest to cause positive change, and also good deeds, and developing philanthropy energy with these good deeds, because philanthropy energy is good deeds interchangeably, more or less. So the craziness of the crazy distraction elements of all of the items that are on stage that are just meant to be weird are fundamentally intended to speak to the subconscious, which relates to the nature of the potential regarding philanthropy energy actions that are meant to speak to greater performances that come from some supposed conceivable conceptual trajectory, philanthropy potential, perpetual, in essence, perpetual energy that can last and recycle and then grow on its own, based upon some little peculiar performances that we started, and that hopefully, somebody had the ability to film, and that ultimately we have the ability to change on a consistent basis as well. That we're consistently shifting and changing all of these performances always by doing different collaborations and having different partners and different partnerships based on the source location. And at the same time, well, you get the idea. We want you to participate. Philanthropy energy aerobics stems from the idea that by us getting weird, by things getting weird, it's a very interactive performance, similar to the Blue Man Group, if you've heard of that, in Las Vegas. They do very interactive, connective experiences. However, we intend and hope, not by being pressurizing at all by any means, but by being incentivizing to develop somewhat actions, perpetual actions, if you will, that are meant to spawn and span from an inspiring and peculiar, unusual, poetic story, if you will, that just is meant to literally just, leak out frequencies into different directions and connect in different ways. Because in essence, if you develop group minds, especially in real life marketing is something that has not gone by the wayside, but it hasn't been given enough credit, more or less. So it's not to say we're trying to do in real life marketing for our company, but we want to develop interesting, fetching, peculiar, weird stages that have the ability to just subconsciously develop an internal hypnotization that causes a flow to occur in terms of manifestation, to realize itself, to be able to functionally align with elements of the universe and humanity that base itself off of growth and nature and natural growth that revolves around positive energy, like the stock market revolves around positive energy, and that's what spiritual finance revolves around as well. And so that's the nature of trying to develop good deeds, and that's the nature of trying to develop philanthropy energy. That's the nature of trying to develop philanthropy energy from a fundamental gathering type of sense, where we start off by doing philanthropy energy aerobics, where we're just kind of stretching the mind while at the same time doing physical exercises and trying to exercise all of the senses of ourselves as we continue to try to exercise the senses with comedy on the forefront and developing different stage elements to try to bring people into awareness and a mindset that functions alongside of happiness and functions alongside of fun and functions alongside of enjoyment and reiteration and recycling of this energy perpetually, communally, locally, and globally, if you will, in an ideal sense. One day or another, one way to the next, 1 minute to the next one, connecting to each other. That's all for now. Thanks again. Think Tech. Think Tech Change for Games. Think Tech Change for Game Studios. Thanks again. Bye. Peace. Bye.